Hello and welcome to part 41 of my video series on how to use Blender 2.6. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to use the NLA Editor. The NLA Editor, in other words, the Non-Linear Animation Editor, is a window inside of Blender that allows us to reuse and combine pieces of animation together to create new sequences of animation. One of the most famous examples of reuse animation is in that old 1970s cartoon Scooby-Doo. In pretty much every episode of Scooby-Doo, there would be a sequence, or probably it would happen several times, that you would see the main characters in the show running across the screen, being chased by or chasing a monster or a bad guy. And this was pretty much a running gag in every single episode, and so they reused those frames of animation. It was old 2D cell animation. Again and again and again, and that saved them a lot of money. We can do the same thing in 3D, although it's even more powerful because we can combine and blend different pieces of animation together to create new sequences. This is done using the NLA Editor window, and we're going to talk about how to use that today, and we're going to make a few animations and combine them together of a really simple character. I'm going to start off by making a bottom half of a character, pretty much exactly like my Minecraft character. Now, if you don't know how to rig a character, I'm going to put links to my 2 videos on that subject. I've got a Bones and Rigging 101 video, and I have a Minecraft guy start to finish video. Both of those links are on the screen now, so if you don't know how to rig, I'll be going over it quickly in this video, but I highly suggest going back to those videos and checking them out. Let's go ahead and make the bottom half of my Minecraft guy. We're not going to make the top half because it's unnecessary for this video. So we're going to press Tab with our default cube, and I'm going to select, actually I'll turn on my screencast key so you can see what I'm pressing. I'm going to select the side of my character. We're going side to side on the x-axis right now, and I'll press E to extrude out, and click, and then E2 and click. This is going to be his pelvis, and we're going to extrude his legs out from these 2 faces. So I'm going to press 1 and 5. So I go to my front orthographic view, and I'll press E to extrude these down, and right about there is good. And I'll press Control R to make a loop cut, and we'll go across his leg, but I'm going to scroll up 4 times to make 5 cuts. Like that. We'll do the same thing on the character's left leg. So I'll scroll up 4 times after pressing Control R. And I'm going to make one more cut across his knee right there. So Control R and then click, and then right click to put it in the very middle. Control R, click, and then right click to put that in the very middle. And while we still have this loop cut selected, in other words, we have this whole loop selected, I'm going to press Shift S, and we'll press selection to cursor, or cursor to selected rather. Again, that's Shift S and cursor to selected to put my 3D cursor right in the middle of this loop, so we know where the knee joint needs to go when we add the bones. I went back to my front view, and I'll press Tab to go back to object mode, and I'm going to add, so Shift A armature bone. So armature and click on single bone, and we can't see it right now because it's inside the middle of the leg, and so I'll go over to my object data tab, and we'll check on the X-ray button, and that'll make the bone show through any objects it's inside or behind. I'm also going to make this bone, or the whole armature, display as wire to make it easier to see. So I'll go to my Object tab, and then change display type from textured to wire. There we go. Let's go ahead and grab this bone. It's going to be his pelvis bone, and we'll put it up so it's kind of in the middle of his hips. Maybe I'll press S to make it a little bit bigger, and I'll press Tab to go into edit mode, select the bottom ball of his bone there, and we're going to extrude out with the E key a left hip bone. This is the character's left side, it's on our right because we're looking at him, and right there looks pretty good to me. And then we'll press E and Z to go straight down, and I'll click right there. And coming up, this is why we put this 3D cursor right here. So I know that my knee joint needs to be exactly right there. So I'm going to select this bone, press W, and click on subdivide. And now I can move this knee joint down to match up exactly with that knee joint. Now I know I could snap this ball to this the 3D cursor, but I'm not going to be that picky today. just so long as it's in the right position up and down on the z-axis. Let's go ahead and name these bones. I'm going to select this one, still in edit mode, and we'll go to the bone tab, and I'm going to name this one pelvis. And let's select the hip left bone, so we'll call it hip.L. And it's important to name your left bones .L, or capital L, so that Blender knows what you're doing, so it can auto rename them for the right bones. And this will be upper or leg .upper .L and leg .lower .L. Okay, so we need to make the right legs, and so to do that we'll duplicate the left bone, so we'll select these three. And to do that, to duplicate these bones and flip them, we need to flip them around this, this ball at the end of the pelvis bone. And to make this happen, we're going to change our rotation point, which is this little button down here. When you rotate an object, by default, it rotates around the median point of that object. In other words, the middle of the selection. If you have more than one object selected, it'll rotate around the middle of all the objects that you have selected. But if you change that rotation point from median point to 3D cursor, you'll now be rotating any object you have selected around wherever the 3D cursor is. For this example, we're going to put the 3D cursor right where this ball is. So I'm going to press Shift S and cursor to selected, this middle one. And so the 3D cursor snaps right there. And we're going to select all of these bones on the character's left. We're going to press Shift D to duplicate them. And then I'll click on or I'll right click with my mouse. And then I'll press S, X, -1, enter. So after I press duplicate, I right clicked to put it back in the exact same spot. So we had two sets in the same spot, and then I pressed S, X, -1, enter. Now these bones are all in the right spot. If I go around, it looks good, but they're all named .L.001. To flip their names, to make Blender automatically do that, if you have them all selected, you can press the armature button and go to flip names, and that will name them all .R. So this is hip.R, leg.upper.R, leg.lower.R. And the last step here is to select these two hip bones, because they're not actually children of the pelvis bone yet. So if we move the pelvis, the hips won't move with it. We're going to select both pelvis bones, and again hold Shift, and we'll press Control P, and we'll keep them the children offset. So now this pelvis is a parent of these two hip bones, which are parents of their legs. So now if I grab the hip bone in pose mode, it'll move the whole armature, which is what I want. Let's go ahead and go back into object mode with the tab key, and I'm going to select the character's mesh, hold Shift, select the bones, and we'll press Control P to make the mesh a child, so it is controlled by the armature. So Control P and with automatic weights. And so now if I select the armature and go into pose mode, because we just parented the mesh to the bones, I should be able to rotate these legs and the mesh follows along nicely. If it doesn't, I was just redoing this whole step. In fact, what I'll do is I'll provide this file without any animation as it is right now as a download in the description area below. Let's go ahead and go to File Save As. I'll save this file, desktop, and we'll call it character -NLA-01, and I'll make that available in the description area below. And I'll make a new file to work on with my animation. So we're going to make two little pieces of animation with this character. We're going to make one walk cycle, and we're going to make the character do the splits. So I'm going to go to my side view, so I'll press 3, and I'm going to make a dope sheet. So if you haven't watched my animation video 101, I'll put the link to the description on the screen right now. But we want a dope sheet, in other words, another window. It's called the dope sheet, which is kind of like a super timeline, which allows us to move keyframes around. So it's right there. Let's go ahead and make some keyframes. I'll turn on my record button, and I'm going to select the character's right leg right there. And we're going to rotate it forward, and we'll take the left upper leg and we'll rotate it backward. So now, because we are recording keyframes, we have a keyframe at frame 1 of the character kind of in mid-stride. We're going to go to frame, let's say frame 10. I'll zoom in by scrolling up on my dope sheet. And I'm going to make him in the opposite pose. So I'm going to rotate his left leg to match the right leg, and then I'll select the right leg and rotate it the other way. So now we have 1/2 of a walk cycle. It's a really bad walk cycle, but it's all that's necessary for this example. Feel free to spend more time on yours and make it a nice, proper animation. But we need to go back to the original pose, because if we make this loop, which we're going to do with the NLA Editor window, it'll just snap back to this position every time. So we want to make it go from point A, or pose A, to pose B, and then back to pose A at frame 20. To do that, we're going to, well, I could just rotate it back at frame 20, but it might not be exact. So I'm going to press A with my mouse in the dope sheet window to deselect everything. And then I'm going to select the first keyframes with the box select. So I'll press B, and we'll select everything. And then I'll duplicate these and move them over to frame 20. So Shift D, and then I'll just move my mouse over. I don't have to hold anything down. And I'll click when it's at frame 20. And so now we have a full loop. The character starts with his right leg pointing forward, and then he shifts over to his left leg pointing forward, and then back to the same original position with his right leg pointing forward. So we have this finished walk cycle, as wonderful as it is. But here's the thing about Blender and animation. When you make an animation in Blender, you're not just making keyframes along some random timeline. When you make an animation in Blender, it's actually stored in what's called an action. And the way that you can access these different actions and put different actions, in other words, little blocks of data of animation onto a character or an object, is using the Action Editor window. The Action Editor window is just a subset of the dope sheet window. So we're in the dope sheet window right now, this second window that I made. And if I change the dope sheet to the Action Editor, we can now see that this, and it looks almost the same, but we can see its name now. We can see that this action, these keyframes, are named armature action. I'm going to name them to walk, and I'll press enter. So now these keyframes, this block of data of animation, is called walk. And maybe I'll save. Now here's the thing about Blender. If you save a Blender file, and you're not using a piece of data in the file, in other words, if you make a material, and you make, let's say, a shiny blue material, but you don't have it on any objects, and you save the file and you close the file, Blender might actually scrap that material, it might delete it because you're not using it anymore. The same is true with these actions that you make of movement of a character or an object. If you have an action, let's say the walk action, and you no longer are using it, in other words, it's not on any armatures, and you save and close Blender, it might delete it. So that's why this F button is here. This F button stands for fake or fake user. And if you click that button, you're going to see the number 2 next to it now. What this 2 means is that, well, this armature is using this animation, but also another fake user that doesn't really exist is also using this, this action. So now that 2 users are supposedly using, or 2 objects or armatures are supposedly using this action, if I click this X, it's going to remove this action from our current character. So I'm going to click the X, which clears the action, but another fake user is still using it. So we're pretty much safe if we want to save and close this file. So now this dope sheet is clear, and we can make a second animation. And if I want to go back and see the walk action again, I can click this little button right here, and we see the walk title, and that lets us add that animation back to the character. Of course, that little F, it means fake, which means it's using or being used by a fake user. But let's go ahead and make another action. So I'm going to start again. We'll go to frame 1, and we can start animating again. But our character is still in some funny pose. If I go to my side view, you can see he's not all back to his default rotation. So I'm going to press A few times while we're in pose mode, and I'm going to clear this rotation, and I'll clear the movement and the rotation and scale of this animation in case there was any movement or scale done. So I'm going to press Alt R, and that'll clear the animation. Actually, I should have turned off my record button. So I'll undo that. Control Z a couple times, turn off my record, and then Alt R, and then Alt G and Alt S to clear the rotation, scale, and position that I might have done to anything or any of the bones. Alright, so let's go ahead and make a splits animation. The reason why I'm doing a splits is because I'm going to make the character walk a little bit, and then do the splits, and then get back up again and keep on walking. And we're going to be doing that by combining two different animations, our walk cycle and our splits animation. So I'm going to select all of the character's leg bones, and I'm going to press, we'll turn on our record button. But to make a pose in this position right now, I don't want to just rotate my bones and then right click. In fact, that didn't even work. What I want to do is I want to press I for the insert keyframe menu, and I'm only going to insert a rotation keyframe right now. So now we know that all these bones are in this rotation at frame 1. Let's zoom in a little bit. We'll go to frame 10, and I'll go to my front view, and I'm going to rotate these bones so he's doing the splits. Kind of like that. Maybe I'll rotate these ones up a little bit too to make it more flat. Perfect. And just like the walk cycle, I want him to do the splits and then go back to his original pose at frame 20. So I'll press A and then B for box select, click and drag a square around these keyframes, Shift D to duplicate them and move them over to frame 20. So now he does the splits and he goes back down again. Let's name this action. We're still in the Action Editor subset window of the dope sheet. So let's name this splits, and we'll give it a fake user by clicking F, and I'll press the X to clear that action off of the armature. I'll save again, and now we're ready to start using the NLA Editor window. To make the NLA Editor window, I'm going to click and drag this little cross-hatched area down, and we'll make another window. I know it's getting kind of crowded here, but maybe we can scale some of them down to make it less obtrusive. Let's change this window type to a NLA Editor window, and by default we don't see very much. In order to see something in here, we have to actually load up an action onto our armature. So I'm going to load up in my Action Editor subset window, we're going to load up the walk animation. So F walk, I'll click on that, and once I do that, you'll see that all my keyframes come up, but we also see keyframes in the NLA Editor window, and it's in this orange bar. Now if I try to move any of these, or select any of these keyframes in the NLA Editor window, it doesn't work. We can select them in the dope sheet window, or the Action Editor window, but we're not so lucky in the NLA Editor window. And that's because we're not really supposed to be able to do that in the NLA Editor window. What we want to do in here is actually take this animation and convert it into a block of data that we can manipulate and combine with other blocks of animation data, like the splits animation that we just created. To make this animation, in other words these keyframes, into a block of data in the NLA Editor window, we have to click on this snowflake. I don't know why it's a snowflake, maybe it's for freeze or something like that, but if we click on it, it turns that block, that animation, into a block of data. Now we can still get back to it, but it's just a block of animation data now. If I scrub through, it still works. It still knows that we have a walk cycle on there, even though we're not seeing keyframes in the dope sheet or the timeline. But this is where things get more powerful now that we're using it as a block of data. If I want him to walk, let's say, more than just one cycle, I can do that by selecting this little block. If I right-click on it, it selects. And now we need to open up the Properties panel at the side of this window. So we can click on this little plus here, or I can press N with my mouse in this window. I'm going to make this window a little bit taller so we can see what's going on. There's a lot of things in here, and I'm not going to cover them all in this video, but the two main sections that you're going to want to be concerned about are the active strip section, which we can collapse, of course, and below that, the action clip section. And if we take a look around, under the action clip section, you can see the repeat option under playback settings. By default, it's set to 1, and that means it repeats only once. But if I change that value to 2 and press enter, you'll see that now this block of data, it repeats twice. And because we made it loop nicely, if I scrub through, he's going to walk nicely twice. And it puts a line wherever there's a new repetition of that action. So if I want him to walk 5 times, I can change the 2 to 5. And that works pretty well. But the power with the NLA Editor really lies if we combine animations together. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add in, under this Add menu at the bottom of the NLA Editor window, we're going to add in another action strip. So I'm going to click on Add Action Strip, or Shift A. So I'll use Shift A. And we're going to add the splits animation. So there we go. And so it made a new track, and this is kind of like a video editor, well, Blender has a video editor in it, maybe Sony Vegas or Premiere or Final Cut Pro or iMovie or something like that. We get these lines, and these are kind of like transitions in a video editor program. Although right now we have this splits block of data in the middle of the walk cycle. I don't want that. I want to grab it and put it kind of overlapping with it at the end. And now those lines don't look quite so daunting and overlapping in some weird way. We want them to fade out of one action block and into another one. And so now he's walking along and he does the splits. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention was that if I select a block of data, and let's say he's walking along, and I want him to walk a little bit faster or a little bit slower, I can do that really easily. Right over the repeat option is the scale option, and if I change that from 1 to 0.5, every walk cycle will take half as much time, which means he'll be walking faster. So if I play this back, he's walking twice as fast. Maybe I'll select that and go to scale 0.75 to make him walk a little bit faster than that. Okay, let's go and press play. That looks good to me. I'll press escape, and we'll select this one and grab it with the G key and put it right there, and that looks good to me. And I'm going to add another walk block of data in, so he does the splits and then he starts walking again. So add action strip. Now it says splits here. I'm going to press delete, and so now we have our full list again, and I'll select walk. And it made another track for us, which is nice. I'm going to change the scale to 0.75, and we'll make it repeat, let's say 3 times. And it made a little bit of a transition there, or a blend, but if I press G, I can move it down, and it's going to blend a little bit nicer. Okay, so this is the real power though with the NLA Editor window. I'm going to do a quick save. Now obviously we don't want him to stay in the same spot when he's walking, and we want to keep this integration nice between the splits and the different walk animations. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, back to frame 1, and I'm going to grab this pelvis bone. Now it's important that I didn't make any keyframes on this pelvis bone, because that might get a little bit confusing and make it more difficult to use the NLA Editor properly. But there's no keyframes on this pelvis bone. And so I can actually make new keyframes and make this guy start and stop wherever I like. So I'm going to turn on my animation. In fact, it is already by mistake. And I'm going to press G to grab and move my character, let's say over here, and put him on the ground. And it made a keyframe. That's great. But what if I want him bigger or smaller? Well, I can do that just as easily. I can press S to scale. I forgot to put my cursor back to, or my rotation point back to median. So that's why I put the gizmo right there. Let's go ahead and scale this down. So the character is a little bit smaller. And this is how you could, combine more than one thing in the same scene and adjust their sizes as well. And I'll put him on the ground. And that's all good and great. Let's make him walk across the screen. So I'm going to go to the end of my animation, and we'll move him across to over here, and we'll play it. And he does the splits, and he continues. Now I want this splits animation to go a little bit slower, so I'll select it, go to scale, and we'll say 2.5. To make that longer, we'll grab this and put it over here. And I think this keyframe up here should be in the dope sheet as well, so I can access it, and we'll move it. I'll select this over here and I'll press G, and I'll move it over to right there. Good. You might run into problems scaling objects if you've already scaled them with a keyframe. So because I scaled this pelvic bone, it scaled everything else down. I've had some issues where object scaling, bones become twice as large as they should be, and I haven't quite solved that problem. But I know as long as you leave the highest parent bone of a character, so a pelvis bone, or if you have a whole controller bone, that's even better for a character. It allows you to move it around without affecting anything funny with the scale or the position or rotation of the character. So there's no animation on the pelvis at all until I added it just now. Let's go ahead and take a look at this animation. Actually, this happened to me when I was about 8. I was walking in new kind of fancy slippery shoes on a wet parking lot, and I was walking along and I did the splits by accident, and I then popped back up again, although my splits was front and back. So I want him to kind of do a splits on the ground. So he's actually going to be on the ground instead of floating in midair right now. So I'm going to go maybe to the beginning of that splits transition, and I'm going to make a keyframe of him in that same position. So I'll press I and location, and then he's going to go down to the ground right about, he's going to start right there. So I'll press I, location, and then when he gets to fully split, I'm going to move him down to the ground. Maybe I'll look at that from my front view. And we're going to have to correct things as we go. Now he stays split. Maybe I'll just go halfway in between and move this up. We're going to have to do a little bit of correcting here to make him stay like he's on the ground. Even put him on the ground right there. And then right here he should be back up on the ground. And then right about there, move him up. Right there, move him down. But this is a really powerful thing, being able to combine animations and then adjust them as you like. You could even take one walk cycle and keyframe the parent bone, in my case the pelvis, and make a character walk around in a circle or walk in a path. But let's go ahead and take a look at the animation as it is right now. We'll do a file save, and I'll press play. So the character's walking along, and he slips and he does the splits, and he keeps walking after he pops up. So that's what I'm going to cover in this video. Hopefully it made sense and you can use it in a productive way in your animation future. Until next time, I'll see you then.